Come on down to the Law Student Lounge with your host, attorney Ryan McKeen, where law students like you tell their stories. So pull up a chair and join us in the lounge.
Hi, everybody. It is attorney Ryan McKeen here, and I'm so excited to be here today on this episode of Law Student Lounge. I am here with Hannah Gyani. Hannah is a 1L student at New England School of Law. Hello, Hannah.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being on, Hannah. Hannah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I would love to. So, I'm a Michigan native. I was born and brought up there just outside of the Detroit area. I got my bachelor's and my master's from Wayne State University. So I got a bachelor's in science and a master's in social work. And I did a concentration in community development and policy with my social work degree. And so that ended up kind of taking me down into the policy world for most of my career. So I worked for a couple of members of Congress in Michigan. I did economic development, grant work, a lot of community outreach. And then I worked for a small nonprofit doing a little bit of community development. And then my last two jobs were kind of around education. So I was a community educator and outreach person for a state level nonprofit. They were doing state level policy work. And so I did outreach with them. And then I also taught in the community about best practices and advocacy and civic engagement. And then I also taught a social work class at a university there, and then moved here to Boston in August. So it's definitely been different living from the Midwest here to the East Coast.
For sure. We'll touch on that some. So you have a background in public policy, and like a lot of people who go to law school, they're interested in public policy. And if you are doing that kind of community political work, you realize, well, policy is law, right? I mean, that's ultimately where it ends up. It's where policy ends up. So what is it that made you decide to go to law school?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's interesting because I feel like I hear a lot of my classmates talk about how they've wanted to go to law school for, most of their life. But for me, it was kind of a later in life dream, I guess I would say. So after I had been working in Congress for a few years, I think it was just kind of always in the back of my head. I think working around legislators and lawmakers, it felt like law school was, the right next step. I really just I kind of see social work and law as kind of two sides of the same coin. We're just helping people in different ways and through different avenues. Social work is maybe more like in the community, and I'm sure law is like that in a lot of ways too. I think I just really wanted the knowledge to share with people. I think going to law school would give me that knowledge that I would be able to translate to people in the community that I was working with.
Now, do you work with specific communities, and are you planning to go back and, essentially serve them as a lawyer in private practice, do government work? I mean, do you have any sort of vision for where it is that you want your career to go?
Yeah, so I think when I think about law school and where I want to be afterward, I always kind of imagine myself just going back into the government world. I didn't necessarily think I would practice as a lawyer. It'd more just be like maybe doing consulting or advising in the policy space. But I'm also open. I feel like people always say you start off with kind of one vision for your career when you start off in law school, and then by the end of it, it can change just based on the classes you take or experiences you have. But yeah, in the back of my mind, I was always like, I'm just going to go back to government and do that work. And the JD is kind of like a supplement to that.
Sure, because I think probably when you're in that field, my guess is that you work with a lot of lawyers. Did you work with that?
Yeah, surprisingly, I'm trying to think of people on my team. So in both of my times with the Congress members, I feel like we didn't actually have too many lawyers. We did have counsel that we would like counsel on things or like ask for their counsel on things. But for our direct team, we actually didn't have too many people with law backgrounds. I think maybe more in DC, like on committees and things like that, we would see lawyers and attorneys kind of advising on policy in that way. But on at least the members that I worked with, we didn't have too many lawyers on those teams. They were more like in DC doing committee work or council work and stuff like that.
So, okay, so you're doing this, and where in Michigan are you from?
Just outside the Detroit area. So about an hour north of Detroit is where I grew up.
Okay, beautiful. I go out to Detroit a few times a year. Enjoy some Buddy's Pizza.
Yeah, I love it.
Yes. Yep. No, Detroit. I have a soft spot for Detroit. I think it's a great city. So, what makes you decide to go to Boston for law school?
Yeah, we weren't planning. So me and my husband, we weren't planning to come to Boston. I was actually just applying to Midwest schools and hybrid programs because I was just planning to continue working and and go to school. But then I kept getting an email from this school in Boston just saying like they had a lot of scholarships available. And so that was really kind of the main reason that we moved out here. I got a really good scholarship to come to New England Law. And that was kind of the deciding factor for us because school is not cheap and we're still paying off a lot of our loans from our other degrees. So the scholarship was really the main factor for us.
So I've lived in Boston and gone to school, undergrad's right outside of Boston at Framingham State. What is it that you find different about the area? Because I mean, look, Boston's got more law schools per capita probably than any city in this country. So what is it that you like about living in Boston? And what is it that is sort of different from your Midwestern experience?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. So I would say the things that I find the most different are kind of the pace of life here. I think in Michigan, it's just like a little bit slower. Like I think we have less people maybe too. Like our population is just like a little bit different than the city of Boston. I feel like it's always just busy here and I'm still not used to the traffic here. I feel like it just drives me crazy to go like 5 miles and it takes me like an hour or something like that. Where Michigan is like, we're a pretty big driving culture. So we tend to drive long distances for work or school and stuff like that, but it doesn't take too long. So I would say that's like the biggest difference, the pace of life. And then what I like about it here, I would say there's like just, it's a really good networking city. Like I feel like no matter where I go, I'm just meeting people who are doing interesting things and doing different things. And yeah, I just find that you meet a lot of interesting people here from all walks of life and a very international city, I find too. Like I work in Cambridge, and so I feel like I see a lot of people from different countries and stuff like that, which is really cool. So I appreciate the diversity here as well.
Yeah, you get a ton of diversity in Boston. People from all over the world go to school in Boston or Cambridge, as the case may be. The city's so old that the roads were built before cars. And
Yeah.
unlike New York, they didn't put in a grid system. So Boston is basically a series of alleyways that are one-way streets that make it very confusing and difficult to navigate if you're driving. Yes, if you are from the Midwest, look, you go to Detroit or Minneapolis or Chicago, you've got cities who are basically on grids, and you've got
Mm-hmm.
roads like, 6 mile, 7 mile, 8 mile road that all make sense. And you have highways, you go all over. I mean, like Minneapolis, I feel like we go to the grocery store, you go on like two different highways.
Yeah.
In Boston, that is not the case. So yes, it is a very, very old city in that regard. And yes, take the T if you are in Boston or
Yeah.
Uber or whatever, because driving is not the best in Boston. So we're talking now in almost late December. So you just finished up your first year. Can you tell us about your first semester? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging. I would say it was definitely a shock to me too. So I think I'm a part-time student. I go to class in the evening and then I work in the day. So I think finding balance between just trying to balance my time with work and balance my time with school was definitely a challenge. And I know that they say like your first year is your hardest year. And I think it's mainly because, our professors say you're kind of learning a new language. So it's a lot of trial and error of like what works well, how do you study, how do you manage your time, and like how are you retaining information, how do you write your outlines. So I found the first semester to be a lot of trial and error. And I found that very frustrating because I'm an impatient person. I just want to be able to kind of nail things down quickly. But I feel like it wasn't until the end of the semester that I actually figured out like a rhythm for like my reading or how to make my outlines and stuff like that for how to study. So I found it to be challenging and good. I was proud of myself for finishing and at least getting through this first semester, but definitely probably one of the harder things I've ever done.
Yeah, no, that's great for anybody out there who's thinking about going to law school or in your first year of law school. Know that it's probably a different way than you've ever learned before. So you're challenged in ways that are different. I mean, if you take a biology class and you're an undergrad, it's like here's a cell amoeba, here's a cell wall, here's this, here's that, here's a picture of a cell, right? In law school, especially with the Socratic method and the case study method, it's sort of like there's a red dot, there's a green dot, and you're supposed to go like, oh, this is a cell. Is sort of the way it all works. There is a learning curve, and be kind to yourself. Understand that I don't think law school gets more work or less work. I don't think it gets easier or it gets harder. I think you just get stronger as a law student. And as a lawyer, the same sort of thing happens for you as you transition into practice, which is also sort of another huge learning curve. So what were like the things, like if you could go back to yourself now in August, right before you start, like what is it that you would have told yourself to do or not do as you are entering into your first semester of law school?
Yeah, I feel like you kind of touched on it. I would just be kinder to myself. Like, I feel like I was just so hard on myself the first couple of weeks of the semester because I was just feeling like I was behind. I was not getting the content. I feel like we had, after we had midterms, and I just honestly did not do that well. And I was like, okay, I don't know if this is for me. Like, I just feel like I had just all these meltdowns throughout the semester of like not feeling good enough for this marathon work that I feel like law school is. But then I think as I got to know more of my classmates better and found out that they were kind of feeling the same way that I was, it made me feel a lot just better that I wasn't the only one kind of struggling with this. And so I would just be kinder to myself and give myself, that would be the advice I would give, to just be kinder and to give myself more grace for not being able to get things right away. And again, it's just like trial and error of like figuring things out. So that's what I would tell myself. Take it slow, be kind to yourself, and know that you'll eventually get it. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah, I think that that's a critical message for anybody out there who's thinking about going to law school or just starting law school, which is that, like, as a lawyer, somebody who's gone through this, like, that experience is nearly universal of, is this for me? Am I able to do this? I don't understand this. This is frustrating. It's sort of like all of that is sort of by design, sort of at its best. Law school challenges you, it pushes your comfort zone and you emerge stronger for it. But boy, when you're going through it, is it just tremendously, tremendously uncomfortable. And, so a message out there for anybody you should take from Hannah is like, you're not alone. And I'm going to tell you, Hannah, like I can remember vividly back when I was a 1L, we had two classmates in our section who at least fronted that they didn't feel that way, that they weren't struggling or they weren't, having a hard time. They knew it. And boy, I remember their faces when we got our midterms back and they got their butts kicked. They got humbled because, it would concern me out there if you're listening to this and you're in your first semester of law school and going, oh, it's easy. I got it. That's going to concern me a little bit. Not saying there can't be some outliers out there, but the vast majority, 99.99% of people out there, like this is what you're going to go through. So that said, like I'm going to say this is a very near universal experience for law students. What things helped you push through or cope with all of this? Like what were you able to do things, talk to people? Like where was your support structure in this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, I guess a practical thing I did was take a day off each week. So I would have Sundays to just be my day where I would rest. I would try to get all my work done and reading done for the week, at least by Saturday, so that I could take Sunday off and just have a brain break and just do the things that I wanted to do things that would be refreshing to me. So I think that kind of helped me practically get through the semester. And then I would say, in terms of just like the hope aspect of it, I would say definitely talking with friends, making new friends in the semester, and just realizing that we're all in the same boat. We're all struggling together. Everyone's kind of going through the same thing that I was going through. And that gave me a lot of comfort, weirdly, that we were all kind of struggling together and that we could ask questions for one another. And we in the evening cohort started this giant group chat. And that was actually really helpful too, for us to ask questions during finals and for people to post different things that would be helpful. So I think that kind of helped me get through the semester. I would say, having your good core group of friends, whether it's at school or elsewhere, that you can talk to and vent to. I am also a person of faith, so I prayed a lot. I feel like that helped me get through a lot of things. I journaled a lot. So a lot of different things. I think just find the thing that refreshes you and refuels you and try to do that often, if not weekly, if you can.
Yeah, build it into what you're doing. And, I think it's like when I heard you block Sundays, I'm like, yes, like that is healthy. Like that is good. Because look, if you're doing this, like, and I sort of liken it to, you'll experience the same thing when you're a lawyer. You'll experience the same thing if you start a business or anything, which is like if the work can consume you if you let it. Like there's no limitation. Like there's no self-imposed, like it doesn't impose boundary on you. And it's your obligation or your sort of duty to yourself and your health to push back and set boundaries. And I think it's sort of a necessary, healthy thing for law students and lawyers to do.
Mm-hmm.
So can I went to law school, I went straight through, I was not working. I mean, I worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car for like 9 months. But beside that, I was not working full-time. I worked part-time during law school, and I went day. Can you talk to me about what it's like to really work and go to law school and the particular demands of that?
I was starting off wanting to work full-time, and I know a lot of my classmates do work full-time, but I also know a lot of my classmates scaled back too. So instead of working 40 hours, they were going to do 20 or 25, which is around what I work. So I would say you have to get really good at time management when you're working and in school. And I'm sure like even if you're just a full-time day student, you have to get good at time management. But I think because, evening students have what feels like very limited time, we just have to be really good about preparing ahead of time and being really mindful of our energy, I think too, because sometimes some days at work can just be super draining and you just don't have a lot of energy with class. So maybe you need to like do your readings another time or something like that. So I think it's really just about being good at time management and making sure that you're carving out time for yourself and carving out time to be prepared for class, but also making sure that you're just keeping up with your life priorities too. Like some of us have families, some of us have kids on top of work and school as well. So I know just finding that time and finding that balance can be hard, but it's something that you gotta just have to work in. And again, trial and error, you just kind of figure it out as you go, I think.
You do kind of figure it out as you go, and let those things like instruct you, and let those things that really challenge you and hurt in some ways instruct you as to like where you need to be. You had mentioned too about, I think this is an important message for law students or people going, is to keep an open mind and to allow yourself, like, you're on a journey. It's hard sometimes to know where you want to go, where you want to be when you're starting out. You're just sort of like leaving the nest, so to speak. And there are areas of law that have not been invented yet that will, when I went to law school in 2005, I mean, there was basically civil law and criminal law. But now you've got cryptocurrency and cyber law and all these issues now. I was with a bunch of IP lawyers last week about AI and copyrights and all these issues that society has to wrestle with. ChatGPT just turned one about a year ago, November 30th. So there's going to be whole areas of law as society continues to evolve rapidly that don't exist. So, keep an open mind and understand too that like your career is probably not linear. I mean, there are some people who may start at a public defender's office and retire at a public defender's office, but most people, their career is like 10-year blocks of different things that they're doing and different opportunities that present themselves. So I think it's important, for law students to be open and to be mindful about what interests them and about what excites them and find your sort of passion. Now, do you find like, can you talk a little bit about how your thoughts on New England School of Law and like, do they support part-time and how does that work for you? How are your professors? Because a lot of people may be considering law school, listen to this podcast, and they may wonder like, what's that going to be like? So how have you found that at New England School?
Yeah, I would say they're pretty supportive. I think that it's a work in progress still too. I think some of the things that we as the evening students have brought up to them is that sometimes there's events during the day or like these networking things that happen to be during the day, or speakers will come in and talk, at times when we're at work. So that's something that they're responsive to. We've expressed that to them, like the administrators there and professors there. And now they're trying to be more mindful of when they schedule things. So I think that they are supportive. They're very open to feedback. And I think our professors really do listen to us if we have things that we want to share. I have a great Civ Pro professor. She's been super helpful. She also is like the first generation law students professor lead. So she's the one that meets with our first generation law students. So if you're not familiar with that term, first generation law students just means you're the first one in your family to go to law school, either in your immediate family or maybe extended family too. And so they offer support for first gen law students. And they try to accommodate for the part-time evening students as well. So they'll do things in the evenings, or they'll do things on times or during times when the evening students aren't in class. So I do think that they're really supportive. I think that they are still a growing program, but they're open to feedback. So I think those are all positive things.
Yeah, for sure. And are you a first generation law student?
I am. Yep. I'm the first one in my family to go.
Yeah, I'm the first person in my entire family, big or small you want to make it, to even go to a 4-year school and then onto law school. So can you talk about what they're doing in particular for students like you, first generation students? Because that wasn't a term when I went to law school in 2002, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. Yeah, it was new to me too. So I do have some people like in my extended family that are lawyers, but yeah, no one in my immediate family. So the first gen program at New England Law basically is just a space for students to gather. So they try to meet either weekly or bi-weekly. And usually it's led by one of two professors, I think. And so it's a place where students could just ask questions, ask for advice, talk about how, they might be struggling through different things, and hear from other students about, how they've been managing it. It's really just feels like kind of a group therapy session or something like that, where we'll talk about things, other people will put in their input, the professors will share their advice or their input. And then there's also resources. So there's an online page that the first gen students can all be on. And they offer resources like study outlines, or maybe tips for how to study, or thinking through networking and how you want to network and where you want to network and who you can network with and how do you create a good resume. So it's all these different things that, maybe first gen students don't have access to easily. They don't have maybe the network that someone who has lawyers in their family or attorneys in their family who could provide that information for them or that advice for them. So it's really just a space for students to gather, to hear from people, hear different perspectives, and hear from professors as well.
That is wonderful that exists. And if you're out there, you're like me or Hannah, and you are first generation, like definitely make use of that, because look, a lot of lawyers are children of lawyers, at least in the Hartford community, which is great. But there are unique and distinct challenges to being really the first one in your family to go to law school, or not have those connections, or maybe those supports, or maybe people who even just understand what you're going through. Like if my kids went to law school, like I'd understand what they're experiencing. But it's certainly, my parents could not. My parents work hard, but they have no basis to understand what law school is, other than probably I do a lot of reading. That's probably like their sort of thing. Yeah, so definitely take advantage of that. So I'm thrilled to hear that. Anna, I think we're going to end it up on that note. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share about yourself, about law school, any advice that you'd give? Anything?
Yeah. Advice I would give, I would just say, again, be gentle with yourself and make sure that you're building in time for that self-care, for growth, and just know that it is a journey. I think my whole career has really been just being open to different things. And when you feel kind of that tug on your heart to do something, just go for it and try it. You never know what experiences will come from that. So yeah, just excited to see a new generation of lawyers. I feel like I'm just excited to see my class and see how, things come to be, and see a new generation, hopefully, of new first generation lawyers too.
Awesome. And we end this podcast, except every episode except one. I got called out on it. So I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make the mistake again, which is like, hey, we're at a cookout, and you're getting a burger. It could be a veggie burger, hamburger, whatever kind of burger you want, turkey burger, I don't care. That's not the question. But we have a vast array of toppings, every topping you can imagine. What toppings are you putting on your burger?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would do cheddar cheese. I love cheddar. I would do some mushrooms, some grilled onions, and maybe a spicy mayo.
That sounds like a really good burger to me. I think I don't know. It's like grilled onions are delicious. Like the grilling it actually enhances the flavor of an onion to me, or maybe the texture, or probably both. But cheddar cheese, mushrooms. There you go. That sounds like a great burger, and I hope you're able to enjoy one soon, Hannah.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Ryan McKeen in the Law Student Lounge. where real law students talk about their real lives. Are you a law student with a story to tell? Learn how you can share your story with us in the episode description. And join us next time in the Law Student Lounge.